How did you decide, and why did you decide at a young age to take on such an incredible task?
From a young age, I wanted to be a submarine officer, and I sort of had to figure out how to get there. And
When you're on the ship at that age and you're underwater, how old were you again?
probably 22 years old at the time.
What were the primary thoughts of you leaving the military?
I was an Atlantic sailor.
Yeah.
They were all over the place to where they were slowly diminished to where there was hardly any Soviet ships left.
If you had to go back, you would have done different maybe.
So when we decided to get out of the military, that's over.
Do you feel that being a veteran has helped you?
It's hard to put in words how much being on a submarine sucks.
Right. Welcome to Veterans Corner. I'm George Hinestrosa, Air Force and Army veteran of 25 years. On this show, we explore how military experience transforms into business success. Each episode features veterans who've built thriving businesses, sharing strategies that turn military training into entrepreneurial advantage. And today's spotlight guest is Jon Scott Rennie. Welcome to Veterans Corner, Jon.
Hey, George, it's great to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'd like to, just for the audience, I'd like to give them a little background info on you. And I'm so excited about this that the research I had to put this together. So have you ever wondered what it takes to lead in the most extreme conditions imaginable? Picture this. You're hundreds of feet below the ocean surface in a nuclear submarine during a mission. The hull of your vessel is the only thing separating you and your crew from crushing ocean pressure. Every decision you make could mean life or death for the entire crew. There's no room for error, no chance to call for backup, and absolutely nowhere to run if things go wrong. Now imagine taking those high-stake leadership lessons and applying them to the business world. Today, I'm joined by a leader who has navigated both of these challenging environments with extraordinary success. Jon Scott Rennie served as a nuclear submarine engineer during the Cold War, completing 7 deployments in one of the most demanding leadership positions known to humanity. But that was just the beginning of his leadership journey. After his naval service, Jon went on to lead 8 manufacturing businesses for global companies before co-founding Peak Demand Inc., where now he serves as president and CEO. His leadership insights have filled 3 best-selling books, including I Have a Watch and All in the Same Boat. And his deep leadership podcast has become essential listening for aspiring leaders worldwide. Jon has a philosophy that cuts through all the typical corporate jargon and buzzwords. He believes, quite simply, that leadership is a people's business. Quote, in a world increasingly dominated by technology, algorithms, and automation, Jon maintains that understanding human nature and genuinely caring for your team is what truly separates the exceptional leaders from the rest. Jon, welcome to the show. I'm fascinated by your submarine experience and how it shaped you. And there's something deeply intriguing about leadership lessons formed in those silent, pressurized depths. So, Jon, tell me, how did you decide and why did you decide at a young age to take on such an incredible task?
Well, thanks, George. It's funny.
We're getting into something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because a lot of kids, when they're growing up, they dream of being a fireman, a police officer,
Right.
an astronaut. And I grew up with my two grandfathers serving in World War II, and I was always fascinated by their stories and the things that they did. One was in the Army, one was in the Navy. And I just figured that I would serve. I knew I would serve, sort of follow in their footsteps. But I think I became really intrigued with stories of World War II submarine crews and captains and all the daring missions they went on, especially in the Pacific Ocean. And I began to realize that that was a fairly exceptional branch of the military to serve in. One is the Navy, but then getting into Navy submarines is a very specialized branch of the Navy. And I just was fascinated by the idea of underwater warfare, and especially at the time during the Cold War, the Soviets and the Americans were sort of playing this cat and mouse game across the oceans, and I wanted to be a part of it. So so from a young age, I wanted to be a submarine officer, and I sort of had to figure out how to get there. And it's not necessarily easy to do. So I had to figure out, how do I go from being just some kid growing up in New Hampshire to being a naval officer on a nuclear submarine? And there's a lot of steps to get there, but I finally ended up there.
So when you talk about that, I think of Das Boot. I remember the movie and Hunt for Red October. I mean, that's what comes into my mind when I think of what you were doing. But as an engineer on a submarine, Were you the primary engineer, like Scotty on the Enterprise, or were you?
No, it's interesting what they do to be a line officer on a nuclear submarine. A line officer means you can take command. So every line officer on a U.S. nuclear submarine has to be a Navy nuclear engineer. So we all have to be engineers. So you start your tour as a junior officer in the engine room, but eventually you move yourself to the front of the submarine. So we all start off in the engine room and then we move our way forward. And so I wasn't, how do I say this in the best way? The only reason I wanted to be an engineer was so I could drive a submarine. It was the way to get to the front of the submarine. It was through the engine room. So I was Scotty for a time, but only till I could get into become an officer of the deck and be able to down watches in the front part of the submarine.
So tell me, what is when you're on the ship at that age and you're underwater? How old were you again? So let's just go back to that for a second, because I'm picturing myself when I first came into the military, and I'm trying to think, because I went into the Air Force and I had a little bit of nuclear experience, but not what you had. What is the feeling with the other young men and your position as, because obviously you have the enlisted, you have the other officers, but as an engineer, I mean, there's how many engineers are on the ship? On the boat?
Well, we have just one engineer. So he's the department head for the entire engine room as one engineer. So as a junior officer, I worked for the ship's engineer. So I was running one of the divisions underneath that department head. So for example, when I came onto the submarine, I was an O1, which is an ensign in the Navy. So you were lower than dirt, basically.
Yeah.
And so you show up and you're given a division. In this case, I was given the reactor controls division, which is the men that basically took care of all of the controls around the nuclear reactor. That was my team. And so you show up to the boat, I was probably 22 years old at the time. And then you get to the ship and they assign you throw your sea bag on your rack. And they say, come back in the engine room, you're going to meet your team.
Wow.
So I meet my team and I'm 22 years old. And then when I meet my team, I realize that they're all older than me and they are more experienced than I am. And so I'm like sort of the youngest person on the team and probably the least experienced on the team. And yet I'm in charge. And that's a very unique position to be in. The Navy puts you through a lot of training and gets you ready for things like this, but you're never really truly ready until you actually do it. And you realize that, holy cow, I'm actually the liability on this team. And that's a very interesting place to be when you're young and inexperienced and being asked to take over a small team like that. And it happens a lot in the civilian world where you're young and you get a chance to lead and you have some experienced people around you. Luckily, I had that opportunity to learn how to do that in the Navy because it became valuable throughout the rest of my career.
So how was your relationship with your leadership? So if you were young, you were expected to do that. So how did you feel like when you were being molded between the anxiety and the responsibility and just having to care for your crewmates and thinking about your job? How was could you sleep at night? How long were your days? The preparation for this whole thing, how long did that take? For you to actually be on a submarine?
Yeah. So to get to the submarine, from the day I decided I wanted to be on a submarine, it's essentially a 10-year journey through high school, college, nuclear power school, prototype. So it was a 10-year journey to get there. So it was a long time. And then you get there and you're 22 years old and you're not really prepared for that moment.
Right.
But one of the things when I talk to young leaders and I talk about this idea of what happens if you show up and you're the youngest and least experienced. And so the things I learned during that time was there's three things that you need to do. One is listen. The second thing is learn as quickly as you can, right? Become valuable to that team. And the other thing is lead. There's some things that only the leader can do. Even though I was young and I was junior, I could look out for my people. I could look out for my team. I could make sure that their needs were met and that if they needed parts, whatever the issue was, I made sure that I represented that team very well. So if you spend time listening to your team, especially if you're young, shut your mouth and do a lot of listening, right? And then you want to learn. We used to say in the submarine Navy, you have to earn your oxygen, right? So you have to be able to learn so that you can be a valuable member of the crew, right? When you show up to a submarine before you're qualified, you're called nub. You're a non-useful body.
Oh.
And that was it was a term of endearment, but it was a lot of positive peer pressure. Yeah. So you didn't want to be a nub, and your goal was to learn as quickly as you could and get qualified so you weren't a nub, Basically, you wanted to earn that oxygen. And I think that's what I learned in those early days was, how do I earn my oxygen? And I sort of took that sort of philosophy into when I got into business. I thought that same thing, like, how do I earn my oxygen? How do I earn my place on this team? How do I become so valuable to this team and not be a liability? I think that early feeling as an O1 being in charge of a small team, I felt like I want to make sure that I'm not a liability, that I'm an asset to this group. And I think I've always thought that way throughout my career.
So on your deployments, and just to before we move on to a little bit of the business side of things, I'm just so excited. I mean, to me, this is like one of the most incredible jobs I think you could have in the military. Were there any moments where you guys were scared, or were there moments where there was that terror of being underwater and maybe being in a situation? Or because at that point is where leadership kicks in, right? That's when big boy rules and everything is out the door. You're there.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my first deployment, we went into the North Atlantic and we had a very, very bad winter storm, and we operated 7 days in a bad winter storm. And when I say bad winter storm, we're talking about being 300 feet below the surface and taking 45-degree rolls. So we were getting slammed. And I remember thinking to myself, I didn't sign up for this. I thought submarines went under the surface and everything was calm, but it was the storm was so violent that we were feeling it pretty deep. And I just remember all the way to that time, everyone was sick, including senior enlisted, senior officers, except the captain. I remember always that it stands vividly through my mind through that 7 days. We all kept looking at the captain to say, does this guy know what he's doing? Right. And he stayed calm. He operated the ship like he knew he was doing. And his calmness sort of calmed all of us down during that time, because it was just, a submarine operates without any backup, without any other resources. We're out alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in a massive storm, and he's just calm as can be, giving us orders, telling us what to do. And it's always kind of stood in the back of my mind that that's our job as leaders, is when the crisis hit, like when you're running a business and suddenly COVID hits and all these things that you don't know what it means and how it's going to affect you. How do you maintain calm? How do you maintain your composure when the rest of the world's going crazy? And I learned that from my first commanding officer, the way he just he took charge, he knew what he was doing, and it just calmed everybody down because he was competent. When he was experienced, he knew what to do.
That's an amazing, it's almost like a hurricane, the eye of the storm, right? You're just that calmness in the middle, and everything around you is like, to some people, it may have seemed like everything was falling apart, and the imagination runs wild, and you're just looking at this one guy who's a pillar. And everyone is like, okay, the captain's still here. We're good.
Yeah. I mean, of course, he's an 06 and I'm an 01. So
how much experience did he have? How much older was he than the rest of the crew, or the next oldest person?
So he was the old man, right? And so he was probably 40 years old, and we were 22. But he was the old man.
Yeah.
And so I look at it now and I laugh because I'm 58, and he seems like such an old man, and with so much wisdom, but he was still pretty young if you think about it. He was probably 42. Yeah.
40 is young.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is incredible. So transitioning from the Navy, so you had these deployments, and now how old are you when you're getting out?
I was in for 5 years, so probably 26 or so getting out, somewhere in there. Yeah.
So at what point did you say, okay, it's time for me to move on? And what were the primary thoughts of you leaving the military? Like, what was the transitioning feeling? Like, what do I do now? Should I stay in?
Yeah.
Should I? And how did the entrepreneurial thing kick in, or was this something that kind of built up after you got out?
I always wanted to stay in, but we won the Cold War in the middle of my time in the Navy. And so we watched the number of Soviet ships kind of in submarines just go from being all over the Atlantic Ocean. I was an Atlantic sailor. Yeah. They were all over the place to where they were slowly diminished to where there was hardly any Soviet ships left in the Atlantic. And so our mission had changed dramatically. And so I found myself thinking, well, what do I do now? I sort of joined to be part of this kind of Cold War submarine sailor club.
Right.
And now sort of that mission was over. So, and I had gotten married as well. So after 7 runs on the Tennessee, I just said, well, maybe it's time to get out, I guess. Because the other thing too is I saw a lot of divorces with senior enlisted and senior officers. I think everyone I knew was been divorced at least once. And I kind of liked my wife, and I thought, well, let's see if we can make this whole marriage and family thing work. So I decided to get out, and It was interesting because I had two job offers. One was with Merck Pharmaceuticals selling drugs, which I knew nothing about. And another was with a company called ABB doing electrical engineering, designing products for the electrical industry. And so in 1994, that's what I did. I joined ABB, which was a global electrical engineering company, building products for electric utilities. And that's pretty much what I've done most of my career is made products for electric utilities, including my own company, which I started 9 years ago. So far as the entrepreneurial bug, it really didn't hit me. I got an MBA while I was still in the Navy. I was working on it.
Right.
I finished it right when I got out. But I always thought I would work for someone else. I never really thought I would start my own company. I worked for other people for 22 years in three global companies before I finally said, I think I'm tired of working for others. I want to start my own company. Yeah.
So did you take advantage of any of in those days? I mean, I don't know how long it's been, but I know today there's a lot of stuff offered to the military service member when they're getting out, like 6 months prior, you start getting into that whole. Did you take advantage of anything in particular, or did you just kind of just as an officer, you say, okay, I'm handing in my commission. Thank you. I've served my country and moving on.
Yeah, I didn't really take advantage of anything, really. I mean, we had like the transition assistance program, I think, at the time, and I think I went through the courses that they offered, but maybe how to write a resume, I think probably the only thing I did. But what I found quickly once I started looking for a job was that there were a lot of people looking for junior officers, especially ex-Navy nukes. So we were kind of in high demand for various different roles.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. Like, I was like, oh, how do you guys even know that we exist? Because it's a very specialized thing that we do as a Navy nuke. And so I was really surprised at how many people were interested in us. But I got to tell you one thing, and I think it's important for your listeners to hear this, is that when I went in the Navy, I knew my purpose. I knew what I was put on Earth to do, which was to be on this submarine and lead this crew, right? I felt like, and to serve my country, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. When I got out, I didn't know anymore. I was lost. And that is not an easy transition to make. And I know for as many people that are listening that are soon to get out, or maybe they just got out, but I would say that it's a hard transition to make, because what do you do after you've reached all of your goals and dreams in life and you're 26 years old? Now what do you do, right? Yeah. And I think it was very difficult for me, and I know it's difficult for other veterans as well, is like, how do you find your purpose again? How do you find your true north? How do you what you've been put on Earth to do? And I think that was a struggle for me. It took me 7 years before I figured out what I was put on Earth to do other than be a submariner. So my whole life I wanted to be a submariner. And then I was out. And then what do I do now? It was very hard for me to make that transition.
Right. Because the focus of the show, Jon, is just that whole thing, what goes on in a service person's mind. It's about bringing out the action, but also it's the inner battles that we have, right? And so you mentioned that a lot of your peers were married or divorced. You as a married service member, how did your wife feel about the whole thing, getting out, and how did that weigh you down, and how did you deal with that? Maybe just because, again, and we all go through it in some way, shape, or form, right? But everyone has a different threshold for pain or for whatever you want to call it, right? And we all deal with that kind of differently. So, and just for the audience, how did you deal with yours? How do you feel if you had to go back, you would have done different maybe, or just with your family, whole thing, a sphere of family, how did you handle that?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because my wife was a dependent of her father. Her father's a retired Air Force major. So she's always been a military dependent. So she went from being a dependent of her dad's to being a dependent of mine. Yeah. So when we decided to get out of the military, that's over. Now, like, there's no more runs to the base to get to the BX or the commissary and all that, right? So when you're just a veteran like I was, not a retiree, you're turning card, you're done, right? It's over. So I think there was a bit of sadness for both of us because A, she's always been a military dependent, and B, this was my dream. So I think there was a transition for us to figure out, like, what's our life outside the military? What's our life outside a base? And the other thing was, like, how are we going to be as a couple? I spent most of my time deployed. And so how do we become like a married couple where we actually live together and I don't go away for long periods of time anymore? And so we're trying to figure that out. Like, how do we, because like when I'd go away for 4 months, she would take care of the bills and everything on the house, and I would show up and like, oh, here, I got it now. I'm in charge. Right. And so we would have that battle when I was in, and then when I got out, it was like, well, now who's in charge? Who's in charge of the bill? So some of those dynamics were really interesting to try to get through and learn, and sort of like, okay, how are we going to be as a couple not in the military.
Yeah.
And that was a transition for us to make as well.
Did you lean on anyone to help you kind of like, did maybe her dad or something, since you said he was retired?
He was retired. Yeah, no, he was no help at all because he said, "Why'd you get out, John? You should stay in." And like he was like he was always like took his family everywhere he went. I'm like, I was out at sea. Like I don't think he understood what I did in the Navy. Well, I mean he did, but he was just like, "Oh, you should have stayed in." But no, he wasn't very much help at all. I think I think we got involved with a church, I think early on, right? The place that we moved to right after the military, we got into a good church family. That certainly helped, having friends and all that in the local community. That pretty much helped. Yeah. And I had a really good job. I really enjoyed what I did.
Since you hit on the church thing, and spirituality is however, whatever religion people may belong to, how do you feel that, especially when you were underwater and then again facing the water of going out into unknown waters into the civilian life? How did your spiritual life, like, was it pressured? Were you trying to search? Were you feeling like you were praying more? Or how's your spiritual makeup? Was it formed throughout this time? Did you feel like you were being tested?
I was trying to figure things out. I think probably the best thing. I sort of grew up in the church and then through college and through the military sort of went my own way. We didn't have a pastor on board, but we did a Bible study every Sunday. Yeah, we didn't have a chaplain. So we would have a Bible study on Sundays, and I would be a part of that and try to find my way. And like I said, luckily we ended up with a good church once I got out, and I met a lot of people that were supportive, but I met some veterans at that church too that had gone through a transition. One was a Vietnam veteran that really, we became friends, and I think that really helped. So someone that could a little understand, like stepping away from serving to trying to live a normal life.
So you worked a little bit for some companies. You said you were working for. At what point do you decide this is time for me to do my own thing? I mean, when did you feel like I'm ready? I have a vision. I'm getting another second wind here. I feel like I know my calling again, right? Now that you've matured, you have all that history behind you.
Yeah.
Now you're going forward. Now my roots, I'm setting roots again. How did you feel at that point? What was your jump from working for someone to actually starting to take things into your own hands?
Yeah. So I'll just go back a little bit in that I told you about 7 years. I was trying to figure out what was I put on earth to do other than be a submarine officer.
Right.
I figured that out. And so it wasn't until I got a chance to run my second manufacturing business. Actually, I ran two manufacturing businesses at the time, one in Ohio, one in Pennsylvania. And I was turning around a really struggling business in Ohio that was losing money, and it had been neglected. And these people, I felt deep care for the blue collar workers in this factory that it was the poor decisions of management in front of me that caused this place to be in such a bad disarray. And my job was to turn it around. And it was at that job where I realized that that's my new calling, which was to fix broken manufacturing businesses for the people. So to make sure that I could turn them around so these people could have good, solid jobs. And so part of that was you had to make money, right? You had to make money. You had to take care of customers. You had to put out good quality products. So you had to do the things to run the business properly, right? But when you did that, then people had good paying jobs. They had reliability. They could depend on us to have a job and have growth and to be able to hire. So that became my new calling. And so that's what I did my entire time in the civilian world, working for other people. But I tell you what, it's exhausting working for others when you're doing it for as long as I did, because sort of the expectations keep increasing every year after year after year.
Yeah.
And the way they wanted me to treat people was inconsistent with what my beliefs were with respect to people. So the mindset was always, let's just outsource that. Let's just shut this department down. Oh, we can move this to China. We can move this to India. And so it was frustrating to me because it was almost like people were disposable. And so after many years of that, I finally just said, I've got to be able to go off on my own and create a business where I can treat people the way I want to treat people, because I can't do it working for others. And that was kind of the main reason I started my own business, was I wanted to create a place where people enjoyed coming to work and we made a difference to our customers in the market, and we weren't playing games.
Right.
And that's what we did. And so 9 years ago, I basically quit my corporate gig for the last time, and I've been working for myself ever since. And it's been a wild journey. It's been hard, but it's been very satisfying because I have created the business that I wanted to create.
So now that we're there, Jon, so what skills, what tools, processes from the military experience, did any of that impact the way you started to structure these companies you were taking over and fixing? Were you able to integrate? Was all of that other training prior to, did you feel that that was helping you in any way?
Incredibly, yeah.
Dealing with people, all of that?
Yeah. So I think that's probably, even before I started my company, I was starting to realize about 10 years ago, I started to realize like the businesses I ran were doing better than my peers, my peers who were not veterans. And I started thinking about 10 years ago, I'm like, there's something different I'm doing. And I don't know what it is. I couldn't put my hand on it. But then more and more time thinking about it, I realized that like, holy cow, it's like the stuff I learned on the submarine is actually what I'm using every day in my businesses. And that's what's getting things done. So what are some of those things? Well, it's like setting a vision, having expectations, follow through, making sure that when someone says they're going to do something, you follow through, you make sure it's done.
Right.
You hire good people, you treat them with respect, you give them opportunities to fail and to grow. All these things that I learned on a submarine were like super effective in running businesses. And so I started writing 10 years ago. I started writing blog posts and eventually I wrote 3 books, but it was all about like me trying to figure out like, what am I doing differently that my peers are not doing? And how is it so successful in business? And so I would think a lot of what I am today as a leader started in those early days underneath the water where I tell people on a submarine, there's a shared level of responsibility and a shared level of vulnerability. So if anything goes wrong, we all perish. We're all gone, right? It's not like one sailor dies. We all die, right? So there's this shared vulnerability. And so that meant that there was a high level of expectations amongst everyone that we had to have each other's back in everything that we did. Every valve we turned, every switch we flipped had to be done with precision. It had to be done in the right way. And I think that kind of mindset has really helped me in business. Like, how do I make sure that every employee knows that they're critical to the mission, right? And it's not just like, well, you work in the plating department, you're not important. No, you're just as important. You're more important than me in the corner office, right? Because if you plate that part wrong and it fails, something's going to go bad, right? So I think for me, it was the idea that just like every sailor is critical to the mission, every employee is critical to the mission. I think that's something that's really stood out to me in the way I thought about things. Like, how do we make sure our employees know what the mission is and know what their role is in the mission at all times?
Do you feel that being a veteran has helped you? Does that carry you forward? Does it give you like confidence? Do you feel like maybe your clients or people that look for you are looking at that, or are they just looking at you based on the outward appearance? Or how do you feel? How does that all intertwine?
I think probably the most incredible thing that I have is an asset, just that experience as a veteran. I mean, it's hard to put in words how much being on a submarine sucks.
Right. Yeah.
We'll just put it right out there. I mean, you're under the water. I mean, there's no sunlight, there's no women, there's no alcohol, there's nothing. And you're there with sweaty other men for months on end. It's not exactly a fun place to be. But I can tell you that nothing I've ever done in my life has ever been as difficult as what I did on that submarine. So the rest of my life has been easy.
Yeah.
Like the rest of my life has been simple. Like when COVID hit, I was like, all right, that's a problem, but it's not North Atlantic Sea State 5 with 45-degree rolls. This is different. I can manage this. I can handle this. So I think I always say to people, like, the worst thing that happens in your life, the worst things you go through, it gives you a high water mark of what you can endure and what you can get through. And so once you've been through those really tough times, the rest of your life is easy. It puts it in perspective. And I think I became sort of like the captain during that time in the winter. It's like, I don't get bothered by the things anymore because I've kind of been through some bad situations where this is fun. I get to go home and sleep in my bed every night. I mean, what could be better than that? I get to see the sun today. What a great day.
So if you have some advice, then let's see, as far as mindset, what can you maybe share with us as far as handling stress and anxiety, in your opinion, right? Again, so everyone has a different threshold, right? But if there are some things that maybe you've learned that things that can be translated into the business world or just getting out of the military, getting a job. What should be your inner dialogue? Let's just put it that way. Like when you feel the stress, when you feel the anxiety, and this is for the audience, obviously, we want them to feel empowered, right? So we all go through fear, and everyone has fear. Anyone who tells you they're not afraid, is fear actually makes us better.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say to someone that might just getting ready to get out and feeling that kind of pressure and anxiety?
So if fear and anxiety is natural, like it happens whenever we go through change. Change is hard, right? And so especially when there's unknowns, we don't know what to expect out there. But here's a great lesson. I think to overcome like fear and anxiety, we need action. We need to move, right? And so I liken it to a boat. You can't steer a boat unless it's moving. Right. If a boat if you don't have any speed on that boat, it will not steer. Right. So I think we got to get moving first, right? And then start steering the ship and to see what direction makes sense to us and what we feel right. And guess what? We might be going in the wrong direction in the beginning, right? And so we make those corrections and we get back on a track that makes sense to us, right? But the worst thing you can do is just to sit and mire in fear, sit and mire in anxiety. Get that engine going, get the rudder in the water, start steering, getting that boat moving in one direction, right? And then figure it out and say, that's good. This is working. I like it. Or this doesn't feel right. This isn't who I am. Mm-hmm. And you make that shift, make that adjustment. But the worst thing you do is inaction. I think we need to move and then we need to correct along the way.
So nowadays then, how do you handle balance, family, work? Do you have a set timetable? Do you make your own appointments and everything? But how do you feel now at this stage from what you've evolved? How are you busier now than you used to be? Are you more in control of your time? Do you feel like you've evolved to a point where you're balanced across the board, mentally, physically, financially? I mean, how do you feel?
We as leaders have to get that in line, right? So we have to be spiritually strong. We have to be physically strong. We have to be mentally strong. We have to be financially strong. These are really essential, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur. I always tell people, like, don't start a business unless you're in a good position to do it. How's your faith? How's your strength? How's your sleep schedule? How's your workout schedule? Are you financially strong? Can you do this? Right? Because it's going to suck. It's hard. Starting a business is really hard, right? So can you do it? Are you ready for it? Do you have a strong marriage? Because guess what? That's going to become tested when you miss a salary or you don't get paid for 6 weeks because of the struggle that's in the business. Yeah. So how strong is your marriage? How strong is your relationship with your children, right? Can they withstand dad sleeping in the office trying to get the factory open to meet a deadline, right? So I think you have to make sure that you have those things right. And then once you're in the role of an entrepreneur, you got to keep that going. And one way I do it is I have a routine schedule, right? So I go to bed at the same time every night. I get up at 4 a.m. every day. Right. And why? Because that's my quiet time. That's my time I can get stuff done. So I can read, I can pray, I can work out. By the time I get to work, I've taken care of some of the me stuff, right? So that I can be 100% there for my people. Right. And so that's essential to have that time. So people that get up, they press the snooze alarm a lot and then they kind of wander into work on a cup of coffee trying to wake up. And I've been up since 4 and I've had a chance to think through my day and to plan my day and think about the critical things I want to get done. And so I can come in like that captain and calm. Cool. There's chaos around me, but I got a plan because I got up early and I prepared for it. So I think that's really important. You've got to maintain that throughout your career. And especially too, as you get older, it's harder to stay in shape and to eat correctly and all that. You just got to do it. You got to stay after it, even when you get older. So.
Yeah, I found that, and I'm just maybe a couple of years older than you are, but I found that routine is so important. And I just caveat on that, right? Routine is really important because the body understands routine, mind understands routine. And like you say, if you just get up and try to roll with the punches every day, that robs energy. Right? It robs energy from your mind, from your body, from the stress, the anxiety seems to creep in. But yeah, I totally agree with that. That is excellent advice. So Jon, so if you have something that you normally share with your audience that you think is crucial at this point from what we've discussed, what do you feel in closing here that you might want to tell people and just veterans and transitioning service member? What is it deep down your gut just from the heart, what do you feel you'd like to say? Because I knew you're that kind of guy. I can feel it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, you're going to be lost. I mean, the bottom line is you're going to be lost. You're going to lose. You're going to lose that connection with the people. You're going to lose connection with the purpose. You're going to lose connection with the mission. But you can find that again. You can find your new true north. You can find the reason you've been put on earth. And guess what? It's going to be hard to find it. It took me 7 years to find mine. But it was this idea, as I talked about earlier, was get the engine running, get the rudder in the water, and keep moving and start learning what works and what doesn't, what feels right, what doesn't feel right, what you're good at and what you're not so good at, right? Until you find that, like, oh, shoot, this is what I've been put on earth to do. And try to find that new true north, because that true north is missing. And that's where we struggle as veterans, is we lose that sense of mission. We lose that sense of purpose.
Right.
But you can find it again, and it's going to look different. And it takes a while to find it. But when you find it, then your days become easy. Then why you've been put on earth. And I think that's really critical.
Totally agree with you, Jon. Excellent, excellent. Well, sir, thank you for your time. And if people want to reach out to you, and again, at the bottom of the video, we'll have all your links and all that. But if people want to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way for them to look you up if they want to just get in contact with you? And I'll put all the books and everything once we publish.
Yeah, no, JonSRennie.com has everything you need, links to my socials, books, all that fun stuff. I run a podcast. Everything's on that, JonSRennie.com.
Wonderful, Jon. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, sir, for being with us today. And believe me, my heart goes out to you, and I thank you for your service and everything you've done. And again, God bless you and God bless America. And we'll see you on the next one. Hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you, George. I really enjoyed it.
Jon, God bless you, man.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.